A very good evening to you. Welcome to this live session. My name is Nina Shaban. Now we're talking about water. Just to give you a brief, the Water and Sanitation Investor Conference shall be taking place from the 6th to the 8th of this week. That's from Wednesday all through to Friday, with the theme being accelerating investments for sustainable access to water and sanitation for all. Quite a number of challenges in the water sector, one of the main ones being the huge funding gap. To discuss this and more, with me in studio is Eric Ruto, who is the chair at the Water Sector Trust Fund, Sao Alima, who's secretary at the Ministry of Water, and Julius Itunga from the Water Services Regulatory Board. A very good evening to you, gentlemen, and thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. I'll just jump right into it. How large is the funding gap in the water sector? We can start off with you, sir.
Thank you, Shaban. Yeah, the funding gap is estimated at 1 trillion, approximately Kenyan shillings. Yes.
And what are your sentiments on 1 trillion shillings? That is a lot of money.
It is indeed.
If maybe you can give us some background on how we got that far.
Well, over time, the investment in water sector has been quite minimal. And I think the narrative that water is a free commodity indeed attracts a lot of attention, particularly from the private sector investors. And over time, the investments were mainly from the national government through the exchequer, which is basically our taxes, and from development partners. Yeah, so private equity or private sector financing didn't find its place in. And of course, given the limited resources and competing need for financial resources, then the water sector was left behind.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Maybe, Eric, you'd have some sentiments to share with us on that?
Okay. Thank you very much. And coming from the Water Sector Trust Fund, as the chair, we're looking at bridging that gap in terms of the funding gap. Actually, what is mentioned is that currently the national government has developed the National Water Investment plan for us to be able to achieve 100% water coverage between 2023 and 2030. And the gap that is there is that in terms of investment, we require approximately almost 1,995 billion to be very specific. So under that, there are going to be various sources in terms of funding. There's going to be the normal exchequer funding. There's going to be investment from the private sector. And where I sit as a chair of the Water Sector Trust Fund is that we usually attract funding, especially from non-exchequer sources, mainly from development partners, mainly by designing projects so that they can be attractive for the private sector in terms of commercial loan financing. And as we go through, we shall be able to specifically delve into the very specific issues in terms of improving the water coverage and sanitation. Okay. Here in Kenya.
Samuel, and I'm sorry about the Sao part. This is Engineer Samuel. Samuel, as you give us your remarks on this 1 trillion shillings gap, maybe you could also hook it up with what is the role of and what is the importance of this public-private partnerships? Elaborate for us, if you may.
Thank you so much, Lina. As you have heard, we have almost 1 trillion financing gap.
Yeah.
This is to invest in the water sector between now and 2030. What is available is close to only 526 billion for the period. But you have analyzed what needs to go into water, which is 239, what needs to go into sanitation, which is 366 billion, what needs to go into water resources, which is 2.5 billion, what needs to go into the large dams, because we aim to do 100 large dams, which is 750 billion. So when you add all this, it's very huge. The gap is very huge for the public sector. So the role of the investors, the private investors, is to invest in the water sector, to release the burden from the public resources. Because if we rely on public resources only, then we'll not be able to achieve 100 coverage by 2030. And we know it's a constitutional right that water is a basic human right. And even SDG, international standards, they require us to give everybody water by 2030. So if we don't do that, if we don't work together with the private partners, then we'll not be able to achieve our target. We'll still be having diseases, we'll still be having waterborne diseases which are common in areas where there's no clean water. We'll still be having children walking long distances to get water. We'll still be having women not concentrating on economic activities but looking for water. Yeah.
All right. I'd like to stick with you on this, on MARTA's funding. Now, on the aspect of legacy debt, which has been cited as a potential to put off investors, how exactly is it been dealt with?
They build out on legacy debt because the sector is funded by, we take loans.
Yeah.
The government take loans. The government funds the sector by taking loans, concessional loans. These are loans with long grace periods. These are loans with long repayment periods and low interest rate of around 1%. So over time, this has accumulated close to 218 billion. So what we have done is to change the way we have been operating the water services, because the water service providers are supposed to pay the loans. National Treasury pays, the water services are not, the water service providers are not reimbursing. So what we are doing is now we are amending the law. We are amending the law to allow, because the Water Act 2016 only allowed, under Section 93, only allowed water service providers to do PPPs. So we are changing the law now to allow the waterworks development agencies to do PPPs. And also to de-risk, because investors will want to invest and they want all the water to be purchased. So the waterworks development agencies will be buying water in bulk from the investors and then sell to the water service providers. So this way we'll be able to also repay the loans, because they will now be investing and also repaying the loans. And then it is also allowed for bulk sales. Yeah.
Okay.
So that way we'll be able to reduce the legacy debts. Yeah. Because the waterworks development agencies, the 9 of them now, will now be paying will be repaying the loans.
All right. Eric, I'd like to hear your thought on this legacy debt and what Samuel has mentioned and how they plan to deal with it.
Okay. Under the Water Sector Trust Fund, our main mandate, which emanates from the Water Act 2016, is to be able to provide conditional and unconditional grants to the counties. And mainly to the counties is that we provide these grants to water service providers and utilities. So in terms of Water Sector Trust Fund, we've rolled out our strategic plan for the last 3 months.
Okay.
And in that aspect of addressing the legacy debt, is that in that strategic plan we've put in what we call viability gap financing. And as he talked about the public-private sector partnership, some of the water projects, and especially water being in our constitution as a right to water under Article 43, is that some of the projects, and we've talked about 100 large dams, 1,000 medium dams, and maybe approximately 3,800 small community dams.
Okay.
So Water Sector Trust Fund, in terms of unconditional grants, will be able to address the issue of the viability, because the investor will come, they will look at the return on investment in terms of the selling of the bulk water. So as Water Sector Trust Fund, we are mobilizing fund that are not for purposes of commercial loans to be able to address this viability gap in terms of making sure that these PPPs are bankable in terms of investment.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Very quickly, Julius, let's hear from you before we go on a very quick break.
Yeah, on the recurring debts.
Yes.
And basically that gap, as a regulator, what we're looking at doing is to create that enabling regulatory environment that will enable the water service and the water service providers and the water works development agencies to really, change a tariff that would enable them to pay the loans. And in the past we've done this, but given the huge non-revenue water levels in the country, it eats into those provisions.
Yeah.
And that has really made most of the water service providers, particularly what I would refer to as technical insolvents, and are never therefore to service the loans.
Actually, that was my next question to you, and we'll delve in a bit more deeper. Let's take a very quick break, and we shall be back with more. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is a live interview on water and sanitation prior to the event that kicks off on Wednesday. That is the Water and Sanitation Investors Conference. Now, before we went on a break, Julius, we were just we just touched on the non-water revenue, which has also it's been a big issue, yeah, more than even the legacy issue. Sure. So, over the years, how much, what digits can we put on, or what numbers can you give us when it comes to the non-water revenue, actually?
Thank you, Siobhan. It's basically non-revenue water. Mm-hmm. Non-revenue water is the water that has been produced or extracted from the source, going through the treatment process and released for sale, but cannot be accounted for in simple terms. So it's rusts. Yeah, it's a loss in the production process. And the trend over time, it was at one point about 2 years, 3 years ago, at 50%. But due to a number of interventions, it came down to 47%. And during the 2021-2022 financial year, it is tuned at 45%. And basically, in terms of financial loss, we're talking about 11 billion, approximately 11 billion Kenya shillings rusts in that value chain. Yes, and therefore that denies the water companies or the water service providers that revenue to that extent per year. And by extension, therefore, it means the unit costs is a little higher because of the losses, because by the time we are incurring that loss, all the, the cost drivers in the value chain have already been taken into account. But unfortunately, we lose about 45% on average. However, there are some companies which have performed very well, and they are below 20%, which is the international benchmark. Just to cite a few, like Nyeri, water service provider, Meru, Nanyuki, are below 20%, which is the international benchmark. But we have others losing as high as 60%, some at 70%, which is really a big concern for us in the water sector.
So how do you deal with this unrealized revenue? Maybe we can start.
Well, yeah, it is non-revenue water is a huge challenge for us, because it is water that is produced, sent into the system. You have used your chemicals, you have used your staff, you have used to electricity, and then it does not earn revenue. Most of it is losses because of leakages, because of old pipes. Some of it is illegal connections.
Okay.
And that is why, Lena, you don't see, Nairobi loses a lot, around 50%, but you don't see water running on the road because there's illegal connections. And that's why we now have non-revenue water police unit to move around and disconnect and also arrest those who are having illegal connections. Some of them are because our water service providers are not committed to reducing non-revenue water, because it requires you to do your water balance, your water audit every month, so that you know how much you are losing at which point and why are you losing it, and what strategies can you adopt to prevent the loss. As a ministry, we have generated standards, we have generated guidelines with support from JICA. We have used several 9 water service providers as pilot basis. So this is now helping them. Even in fact, on Friday, we were in Mombasa with my PS Julius Korir, talking with the water service providers on how to reduce non-revenue water. We are now also urging our water service providers to introduce smart meters. Smart meters, so that they don't, the meters are very accurate, because some of the meters are also very old. So we are building momentum, and we are given standards, and we are given that we should reach the sector benchmark of below 20%. Once you have gone below 20%, and in fact some of the countries like Japan, which is doing very well, is only 5%. The worst country I know is Jamaica, which is 68%. Kenya, we are at 45%. We are on the average, but that is not good for us. And that's why we are doing all these efforts, so that we recover that money which is lost, and we improve the efficiency of water service providers, so that as we go into the conference looking for money from the private sectors, we also need to reform the sector so that we can get efficiency, and that efficiency will come with revenue that can be invested in the sector.
I hear you. But from my research, the vast informal settlements, this is where there's more non-water revenue. So what are you doing to what are you doing to loop them in and to ensure that they're in the radar so that they can be built?
Yes, so in the formal settlements, we will have challenges, and they pay very heavily for water, because they get water from water vendors, they get water from the people who draw water through cuts. So we want the regulated water service providers to provide water services in those areas, because they are there because there's a deficit. There's a demand.
Yeah,
so if you reduce that demand, then they will not be there. And if you reduce that demand, then the cartels on water in the informal settlement will not be there. So that is what we are now doing with the water service providers, to supply water in the informal settlement. In fact, we have drilled several boreholes in the informal settlement in Nairobi, and those are now being operated by Nairobi Water Company. Yeah.
All right. Eric, your thoughts on non-water revenue?
Okay, thank you very much. On non-revenue water, which currently stands at 45%, as said, and around 11.2 billion. As the mandate of Water Sector Trust Fund is to look at to build capacity for the water service companies. We are currently doing a program with the 2 largest water service companies. That is Nairobi Water, which we've had their non-revenue water is almost at 50%. And if you're even to convert it to commercial aspects, is that they are 50% of the turnover of the sector. That's approximately 13 billion, so it's around 6.5 billion in terms of loss. So we have done capacity building for Nairobi Water and Eldoret Water Sanitation Company, whereby we are using technology. We are in the process of procuring approximately 80,000 smart meters. And that came into being because when we looked at some of the pilot studies by using smart water meters, we were able to address the commercial losses because this non-revenue water is from the technical side where you lose from the burst pipes and everything. But we've just been informed that if we are losing that kind of water, we'll be seeing Nairobi flooded each and every day, 365 days in a year.
Very true, yeah.
But it looks like also there are illegal connections, commercial losses. So we are using Internet of Things. We are going to procure maybe in the next 3 to 6 months. We shall install in Nairobi approximately 30,000 smart meters, and in Eldoret approximately 50,000 smart meters. Looking at the total requirement in terms of digitizing the water sector, Nairobi would require approximately 1 million smart meters. So this is an area whereby we are attracting now investors to be able to invest in this venture, because the return on investment, one of the pilot which was carried out, is that one of the WSPs was able to repay the cost of that investment within 6 months on the investment. So it's a very attractive area for public-private sector partnership. And on the other aspect, especially on the low-income areas, because they are marginalized. And one of the key roles that we do as Water Sector Trust Fund is to be able to have developments, especially in marginalized areas. We are currently undertaking with the German Development Bank, that is KfW, a project on water urban support program, where we look at increasing this piping and this seaward water in the informal settlement. So this will be able to address the shortage that we are having, especially in the marginalized urban areas.
All right, when we get back, we'll be taking a look at the financial sustainability on the water service. So we take a very quick break and we shall be back with more. Welcome back. If you are just joining us, the conversation we're having in studio is about water and sanitation, and this is prior to the Water and Sanitation Investors Conference, which shall be taking place from Wednesday all through to Friday. Now, Julius, as a regulator, according to my research once again, there's some sort of licensing that the Nairobi County has done for those who are selling water, even if it's someone who's carrying water with them kokoteni. Please shed some light on this, and is this something that can cut across through the nation?
Thank you, Siobhan. Yes, it is. It can cut across the nation, and as a regulator, we indeed issue instructions to all the water service providers to take an inventory of each and every person within their service area who is dealing with water services, be it drinking water or wastewater. And this is cutting across the entire nation, where we have regulated water service providers, Nairobi included. So we didn't, delegate that responsibility to the water companies to deal squarely with everybody within their service area. Because in licensing, what we do, we assign a water service provider a specific area of responsibility. And that specific area of responsibility in terms of water services, and when we talk about water services, we talk about it includes both potable water and wastewater. So the water boosters, the private investors who have small systems within the service areas, all the water vendors in general are supposed to be registered and regulated by the owners of those service areas.
What is the success rate?
Quite minimal to say. It's about a year now since we issued that regulatory direction, and the success rate, I can say, it's about 25%.
25%.
25%.
All right.
So progressively, we would want to achieve the 100%, where each WSP has full control of its service area.
Okay, and even as you implement all these reforms, how do you ensure that the end consumer is not burdened with higher costs?
Indeed, the reason why we are doing that is to make sure that the prices or the tariff that the end consumer is charged is known. But without knowing who is supplying the water in the first instance, or the services generally, in the first instance, we wouldn't even know how much they are charging. So the first step is to know who it is that is, carrying out that business in all the regulated areas. Thereafter, we get to the next step of knowing or prescribing how much they should charge and, the levels of service generally.
All right. All right. Gentlemen, do you have any take on this? Eric, maybe?
Yeah, in my other life, I was a board member at Water Service Regulatory Board, so I've been quite a lot in the water sector. And I think maybe part of the suggestion that we would go into is that looking at the energy sector, where we have the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, where they publish the cost of fuel across the country. I think this could be one of the innovative ideas in terms of the Water Service Regulatory Board publishing the cost of to the end consumer, especially with the water boozers and the exhausters. But looking at water sector trust fund in terms of contributing to this phenomenon is that we fund some technologies and innovation ideas. And if you go to Uhuru Park, maybe a few meters from here, there's a technology called space drift, whereby these technologies come from, it's able to clean water, seaward water, and you can be able to take a glass of water from, like this, from that technology. So, and this one will contribute because what happens is that think of an exhauster from Ngong to Ruai in terms of cost of fuel. So there are some unscrupulous individuals who might want to dump this water into the rivers. So having such decentralized technologies that are affordable, they are modern. If you have time, you can go and have a look at it in Uhuru Park. And we are able to fund this, first of all, to demonstrate that it's working so that it can be implemented across the country. We sponsored several other technologies, and I think in this water investment conference, these are some of the stories and technologies that the private sector will be exhibiting.
We will talk about that in just a bit. Samuel, your thoughts?
Thank you so much, Nina. We are trying to come up with, we are coming up with an app that will be on our phones. So when you need water, you can order through your phone, and this you will know where this water is coming from.
How is that going to work? You
will know how the quality of water, and in fact, even the exhausters will know where they are dislodging, because currently we have very few dislodging points. Particularly, we have one in Njiru. We are developing with at the waterworks others, about 4 others, spread all over the country. Dagoretti, we are Karen, Gawasukari, so that they have got many places of dislodging the wastewater. But there will be an app. So when you pour on the road, it will be known that you are poured on the road, because that is going to pollute the environment. That is under development. We have done the first phase last year. We have tested, and we are working on it now. So when it is finalized, it's going to be launched, and it's going to be going to be used all over the country, so that we avoid exhausters dumping their waste along the road and on rivers.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and just to stick with you, there's a current amendment that is being proposed to the water bill, and the bill seeks to promote private investment in the water sector, and then this is through public-private partnership model. Kindly expound on that for us.
Yes, the bill is currently in the Senate.
Okay. It
has gone through the National Assembly. It is now being discussed in the Senate. I think it has gone through the second reading. The bill promotes public-private partnership in the water sector, because in this country we have not done that, and the Water Act 2016 did not include that. So it included that only under Section 93 for water service providers. But now we want the waterworks development agencies to be the contracting authorities, those who can take water in bulk, who can take the water from the investors, and then sell to the water service providers, and also to allow them to do them in bulk. And as mentioned earlier, also to allow for repayment of the loans. Yeah.
All right. Eric, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, looking at the issue of the public-private partnership and the water bill that is currently in Parliament as a water sector trust fund, with the Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation, we are proposing water regulation under the water sector trust fund, so that water sector trust fund can be able to mobilize funding, especially from the local banks and commercial banks, so that it can be accessed by water companies. And we've done some of the sounding, and we know that we can be able to raise even up to 100 billion, so that what happens is that the public sector companies, they might not have the standard private sector collateral in terms of security of the loan. So we have those regulations which are undergoing public participation to see how we can be able, as a water sector trust fund, to be a bank for the water, so that the water service companies can be able to borrow from this fund.
How will you ensure that the public's interests are safeguarded?
The public interest will be safeguarded through the regulators, because we have regulators which are basically protecting the consumers, so that the consumers are not overburdened. And for the consumers not to be overburdened, we have standardized our costing. Because if a project is expensive, then it will end up the water being expensive.
Yes, yes, yes.
So we have standardized our costing. We have rationalized our construction of dams, so that we know what dams should cost, so that before we sign up with the investor, we know clearly what the project will cost. We know clearly what will the cost of water, so that the consumers are not burdened.
All right.
Yeah.
It takes us back to what you had mentioned, Julius. Do you have anything to add on that?
Just to add that we didn't need to change, of course, the way of doing things. We've been on the other forms of financing over the years. Water for all in the year 2000, which we didn't achieve. Now we have a vision 2030 that promises water for all, access for every person, which is also guaranteed in our Constitution, 2010, and also recognized in SDG 6 of the United Nations. So really for us to achieve that universal access in the remaining less than 7 years now from where we sit to 2030, we need to think innovatively on how do we fund the gap. It's really not rocket science, even if we were to take almost the entire budget and for a number of ministries and put it underwater, wouldn't still achieve that universal access in 7 years. So public-private partnership will not have come in any other year than now. We need it now more than ever before. But basically, as you did mention, we need to safeguard the interests of consumers. But as we protect the interests of the consumers, we also have to safeguard the interests of the other players. And in ensuring that the commodity is available. At times we talk about expensive, high tariffs, which to me is relative. Currently, on average, we are charging less than 100 shillings per unit. 100 shillings per unit is less than 10 cents per liter. Yeah, a unit is 1,000 liters. So if you divide 10,000 by 100 shillings by 1,000 liters, it's not even a shilling per liter. It's 10 cents. Yeah. So it's for us to educate our people and appreciate that water is life, and that we need water for everyone, so that we are all enjoying the quality of life that we would wish for each one of us.
All right.
So public-private partnership would be able to support the country and the government in bridging this gap, so that we can have, more resources channeled to water services, and of course, in ensuring that there is a clear governance structure, as explained by Engineer Rima, that will, support the government in ensuring that there is value for money for each and every project that is developed through public-private partnership.
All right. Thank you. Gentlemen, we're almost coming to an end, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. Have we completely squeezed out on this private-public partnership? Are we good on that? Do we have any more thoughts on it? Eric?
I think...
Eric?
Is all like...
Yes.
Okay. So what I would say is that maybe that's why we have WASIC 2024, which we, in partnership with the Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation and the Water Sector Trust Fund, we are having this water investment conference where we have majorly four thematic areas. The first one is a public-private partnership. The second is what we call the catchment to the tap. How would we conserve where the source of water is? We're also going to discuss governance as policy, water and sanitation for all by 2030. One of the most critical discussions that we're going to have is that we are having case studies that have been done in other areas. We are having the best technologies that has been implemented, especially to be able to achieve the very efficient and low-cost development of water services, so that at the end of the day, when you're talking about protection of the consumer, we should be able to look at the upfront investment so that it's not heavy. And what I would like to maybe at this moment is that it's going to be done under what we call water purchasing agreements, so that the price is known. If the concession period is 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, government is going to have that agreement with the investor. So it is known to the consumer, it is known to the investor, and it is going to be constant for that period of the concession.
What other measures are you taking to ensure that after the conference, people walk out with tangible benefits? Yeah,
exactly. Looking at the statistics that have come so far, we were looking at 1,000 professional delegates. We've already burst that figure.
Congratulations.
We are looking at, out of that, 30% are investors, so they're coming in with their technologies, they're coming with funding. So there's going to be a lot. We've already developed a software whereby we have registered all the delegates who are coming, the investors and their areas of investment. And after this, we shall have an implementation manual so that we can be able to do follow-up for the discussions that are taking place and the commitments and the partnerships and the MOUs that are going to be signed during the Water Investment Conference, which is going to start in the next, I think, 1 or 2 days from 6th, 7th and 8th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, your parting shots. We'll start with you, Engineer.
My parting shot is that we have de-risked the water sector for the private players to come in, because we have identified all the risks. The risk mainly is non-revenue water and last mile connectivity. So we have included this in the investment. So the private player will invest maybe in the water source, and then there will be an off-taker. And there will be also downstream works, reducing non-revenue water and increasing last mile connectivity, so that the economy of scale is achieved. Okay. So as far as the sector is concerned, we have risked the sector. So the private players would come in and invest in the sector.
All right. There is in the sector. Eric, we'll be back to you. Any final words?
Yes, for Kenyans, for the private sector, welcome to WASIC 2024, whereby we shall be able to share you the opportunities that are available in terms of investment in water. It is ready. We have called in several bankable investment projects, which we shall be able to share during the investment conference. And also in my other life as the president of Kenya National Chamber of Commerce, where we have 200 MOUs and affiliated to 176 chambers globally. We usually have a lot of inquiries. We've called these investors to come, international investors, and welcome in the local investors so that they can come, they can do joint ventures, they can exchange technology. They could even be able to even have a local production and industrial production of the products that are required in the water sector. Thank you.
All right. And finally, Julius.
Thank you. As the water services regulator, we will and we are ready anytime to collaborate with all stakeholders in the water value chain to create that enabling regulatory environment that will promote investment in water services, and that which will, in the same, length, ensure that consumers are protected against any kind of exploitation, while at the same time safeguarding the interests of all the other stakeholders. It is a balancing act. It's not easy. There are always competing needs by all stakeholders. Consumers would want to enjoy free water. I'm sure if given that option, you say, I want to enjoy free water,
yes.
But there is no water that is free unless you wait for it up in the grounds when it's raining. The moment it touches the ground, even in the river, you need to protect that river so that it is sustainable. So the cost starts accumulating.
Okay.
And therefore the need to recover at least some costs to go towards conservation and ensuring sustainability for the generations to come.
All righty.
Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll be sure to be attending the conference, the 3-day conference. Well, that's it for this live forum. My name is Nina Shaban. Please do enjoy the rest of your viewing.